Links to previous episodes are given in the video description, so don't forget to like, subscribe and share the video. The Haunt of Love and Lies. Episode 10. Chapter 85. The West Tower in the Dark Palace, somewhere in the East Central. I moaned, settling deep into the hot water that covered my skin. I felt the steam seeping into my bones and I loved it. I loved the warmth that covered my massive chamber, and the blue candle light that was lit in every corner of the room. My golden eyes squinted, watching the beautiful woman that lay on my bed. Her stares made my member harder. In my 600 years of existence, no one had made me feel this way, this alive. She was mine to have and to keep. I watched her move from the bed, placing her slender legs on the ground. She knew exactly what she was doing to me, and I couldn't help but smirk darkly. Slowly, she pulled from the bed, taking careful steps towards the tub. Her long brown hair cascaded down her shoulders, covering her face as usual. She only had a transparent sleeveless dress on her, which covered anything. I could see the perfect outline of her. My smirk deepened as I kept appreciating her beauty. She stopped right before me. I couldn't see her face, but I could see the naughty smile playing on her pink lips. Slowly, she began pulling down the single strand of her dress. In short seconds, they fell to the floor and her beautiful form was in my view. She bent slowly, joining me in the tub, moving her body in the hot water until she was right next to me. Her hands pulled up to my neck, and I moaned at the pleasure she was giving me. Taking a bold step, she pressed her body to mine, making me feel her softness against me. My member hardened the more as she began to grind her lower half on me. I moaned, moving to the rhythm of her stimulation. I had to see the face of the woman that had always invaded my dreams. My fingers began pulling back her hair from her face, but just like in my other dreams when I was about to see her face, she vanished, and I awoke from my dream. This time it was different. My finger pulled back her hair, but all I could see was a bright blue glow covering her face. Her eyes were torching bright blue. Suddenly, the whole chamber began to shake uncontrollably. The windows flew open, and the violent wind from outside crashed into the chamber. That was when my eyes took notice of the blood moon that was hanging boldly in the red sky. My golden eyes rounded. This can't be. My eyes fell back on the beautiful woman on the bed, and I saw it in her gaze. The blood moon. It was embedded in her bright gaze. I gasped as my golden eyes darkened. It was her. That child. The white wolf. The prophesied one, she still lives. I jerked up from my sleep. My eyes scanned around my chamber and it was just fine. I pushed up from the bed, donning my garment. I hurried to the window, peering at the sky. It was a blood moon. A moon that signified the power of the white wolf. Landon! I growled, and hastily, the doors to my chamber burst open, and Landon, my most trusted servant, hurried in. Yes, Dark Lord, he stammered, bowing his head to me. Bring Nicholas to my chamber at once, I growled again, my eyes not moving away from the blood moon in the red sky. Sire, Sir Nicholas and the witches are at the dark cave right now, Landon informed me. I will inform him at once. Sire, leave it be, I said coldly, I will join them in the dark cave. I stormed out of my chamber. I left my chamber immediately, moving through the dark hallways with the warriors behind me. I descended the stairs and took the path to the underground cave within the castle. It led me outside in the darkness. The blood moon was still shining brightly in the sky. I continued to move in the darkness when a bright wave of energy swept through the entire castle grounds. Its great magic forced me to halt in my tracks. It was identical to the great energy that filtered around my chamber in my dream about her. After several turns, I reached the dark cave that belonged to the witches of my dark circle. As if expecting me, Nicholas was at the entrance awaiting me. "Did you feel it?" I asked as soon as my golden eyes took him in. "It's her, yes, Dark Lord." "I am as shocked as you are," he muttered, lowering his head down to me. "All these years, we believed that child was dead, but she isn't. That Alpha Nell, he failed to fulfill his obligation 14 odd years ago." I paused, listening to Nicholas. My eyes were glued on the powerful blood moon. I could feel its power and the instant pull to it. That child was the one that always appeared in my dreams. She was the woman I have been desperately searching for all this while, my dark Luna. I groaned, "What a twist!" "What is it, Dark Lord?" Nicholas asked beside me. "It's her. It has been her all along. That child has been the very woman I have been searching for," I told Nicholas. "Your Dark Luna?" he asked calmly, and I nodded once. "For more than a year now, I have been having dreams about that woman. I have never been able to see her beautiful face. Whenever I tried to know exactly who she was, I ended up waking from my dreams. It was after some months, I realized just who that woman was to me. She was my destined mate, my Dark Luna. But what I didn't expect was that in my 600 years of existence, I, Vladimir, will be mated to the very child who was rumored to be the end of me." Nicholas was about to speak when the inside of the cave sparkled with bright light, and I felt the human energy that had been sucked by the phoenix stones. I turned to Nicholas, before moving deeper into the cave. I stopped at the doorway, watching the several dark witches of my circle preparing another ritual to channel the blood sacrifice that was done in the west. "How is it coming up?" I asked. Nicholas released a dark smile. "The blood ritual isn't anywhere near complete. We still need more sacrifice, my lord." "Fine, inform the circle and get as many warriors as you need to attack the east." I watched as the witch's chants grew fiercer, making the 4 phoenix stones that were positioned around the wooden coffin glow brighter. Nicholas was right. We still needed more sacrifice before we could breathe life back into her. "And the woman? What do we do about her?" Nicholas asked me, and I glanced once more at the blood moon, before meeting his stare. "The child still lives, so we must find her, at all cost." Killian's point of view. I dismissed the meeting, leaving with everyone. To my surprise, I had forgotten to close the general link between the pack and me, and now the entire pack knows everything. They were aware of the situation, that Thea wasn't the gifted one, and that Sheila could be the one we had been searching for. I moved in a hurry back to my chamber where Sheila was. Brielle was with her, and as soon as she saw me, she lowered her head. "How is she?" I asked her, moving to the bed. "Still the same, Alpha. But I think she's in pain, and her body is still hot," Brielle said, and I nodded to her words. After some time, she left my chamber, leaving me alone with my mate. I snuck into bed, laying right next to her. My large hand fell on her soft round face, and Brielle was right. Sheila's temperature was rising every second. I cradled her softly into my arms, stroking her brown hair. She looked so fragile. I couldn't stop the tears that rushed from my eyes. This was all my fault because I couldn't protect my own mate. Even though I tried not thinking about it, I couldn't help but reconsider Valerie's claim about Sheila being the gifted one. Was that truly possible? I really did not know. But if truly my very own mate was the gifted one we had desperately searched for, I don't know how I'd forgive myself for everything I had put her through. The pain and the heartbreak. I rested my head next to hers, watching her as the night faded away, ushering in a new dawn. I jerked my eyes open. I didn't know when I fell asleep. My eyes fell on Sheila. She was still unconscious, and her temperature remained the same. I sighed, pulling my gaze to the window. It was already bright outside. I tucked her securely under the covers, heading to the bathroom. I showered and got dressed. Just then, there was a knock on the door. "Come in," I said, and the door pushed open, revealing Valerie, and beside her was Lorenzo. They lowered their heads to me, before moving closer to the bed where my mate was. They checked her condition and both Valerie and Lorenzo muttered some chants, to lessen her temperature and aid her quick recovery. I didn't want to leave Sheila, but there were a lot of things that had to be done with the destruction that happened throughout the territory last night. I left Sheila with Ria in my chamber, heading to the pack house. With the help of the witches, we were able to fix the damage and destruction that spread throughout the pack. I was in my office, having a meeting with the pack ranking members when I was mind-linked by Jax and Nate. They were patrolling around the pack's borders. "Alpha, we have a problem," Nate's mind linked me. "What is it?" I said. I could have been prepared for anything that left his lips, but not the words that echoed in my ears. "It's the Alpha of the Silver Mist Pack. He is here, and demands to be allowed into the territory," Jax said through the mind link. I got up on my feet in a hurry. "Alpha Lucius? What was he doing here?" "He must have heard about the attack," Riker sounded in my head. "True, but he is not welcomed in my pack," that was the fact. The Silver Mist Pack and the Crescent North Pack were enemies. There was no valid reason for him to be here, except for Sheila. I sighed, listening to Jax. "Should we let him in, Alpha?" "No. He is not allowed to step a single foot into our territory. Send him back at once, and if he persists, the pack can shred him into pieces." But I couldn't say that, even though the words were tempting. He was Sheila's father, and I could bet she wouldn't want a fight between us, especially when she was in that state. "Let them in, and see to it that they are cautiously escorted to the castle," I breathed out. "Yes, Alpha," both Jax and Nate sounded in response. I dismissed the meeting. Morgan, Mason, and I sauntered to the castle doors, and just then, Alpha Lucius and a few of his warriors reached in front of the castle doors. "State your purpose here, Lucius. You are not welcome in my pack," I sounded. His dark brown eyes scanned my warriors that soon stood behind him. A small, annoying smirk fell on his lips. "I am here solely for my daughter. Word came to me that there was an attack last night. I just simply want to know how my daughter is doing," Alpha Lucius said. Sheila can't see you right now, I told him. And why is that? Alpha Lucius spoke with a frown. She's unconscious. Precisely why I need to see her. She's my daughter, he said, and I considered his words briefly. Regardless, he was right. Sheila was his daughter, and I couldn't stop him from seeing her. Come with me, I told him, leaving his warriors at the castle doors with some of my own. But he insisted one of his warriors came with him. I led him and one of his warriors who was dressed in black to my chamber where Sheila was lying unconscious. As soon as Ria saw us, she was up from the bed, she lowered her head to both Lucius and me. Leave us, I need some time with my daughter, alone he demanded, insisting Ria, and I left him and his warrior in my chamber. I apologize. But that won't be possible. I am her mate, so, I will be staying right here, I said to him. Let's not delude ourselves, Killian. We both hate each other and I do not trust you one bit with my daughter, he said coldly. The same daughter you were more than happy to send away with an enemy of your pack. I asked him, folding my arms against my chest. The only reason I allowed him to see Sheila was because he was her father, but I haven't forgotten how I was told he treated her during her years in his pack. I don't know why he was here, but I do know it's not solely because he was a good father and wanted to see his daughter. He remained silent, regarding me with hooded dark eyes. His gaze shifted to Sheila on the bed. And slowly he began to move closer to her. He stopped midway and turned to his left where his warrior was standing. I need to make sure my daughter is all right, check her pulse, he instructed his warrior. He remained silent, regarding me with hooded dark eyes. His gaze shifted to Sheila on the bed. And slowly he began to move closer to her. He stopped midway and turned to his left where his warrior was standing. I need to make sure my daughter is all right, check her pulse, he instructed his warrior. My brows furrowed. No other male has the right to touch what's mine. If you want to inspect her, I suggest you do it yourself, Lucius, I voiced. He isn't only just a pack warrior, he is also a healer. I need to know what's wrong with my daughter since no one will tell me, he sounded. I apologize, Alpha Lucius, but even you cannot touch her. From the entrance of the door, I heard Valerie's loud voice. She spared me a glance before walking in. Her deep purple eyes fell on the male standing next to Sheila, before pulling her gaze to Lucius. Luna fell unconscious after abruptly shifting into her wolf for the first time. She needs rest, and being crowded by a lot of people won't do her any good, Valerie said. She is the one taking care of Sheila. You wanted to see your daughter, and you have, now leave my pack, Alpha Lucius, I said to him. His dark eyes narrowed on me hatefully. Without saying a word his gaze fell on the warrior on his left. He nodded gently, one of these days, Killian, I will teach you a lesson, he said, storming out of my chamber. I asked the warriors to ensure they escort him and his warriors out of my territory. I was left alone with Sheila. I settled on the bed next to her, placing a kiss on her forehead when she stirred on the bed. Suddenly, a small groan left her lips, her eyes parted open and my eyes fell into her beautiful ones. She groaned on the bed. I reached for the cup of water on the table, and brought it to her parched lips. She drank from it hungrily, finishing the water in the cup. Easy there, I held her in my arms, allowing her to lean on me. I really did not understand why her body was still hot. Killian, I feel so weak, she whispered to me. Shhhh. Don't strain yourself to talk, I will call Valerie. Sheila cut me off. No. I need you, Killian, please just stay with me, she whispered, her eyes shutting closed. I held her in my arms, calling for the pack doctor. She came and gave some medicine to Sheila, and never once did I leave her side. I stayed with her throughout the night. I stirred on the bed, pulling my eyes open. It was still dark outside, and the candle light that was lit in my chamber had been out. Quickly, I turned them on, lighting the entire chamber. My eyes widened as they shifted to the bed, and I couldn't find Sheila next to me. Sheila's point of view. I groaned internally in pain. I felt sore all over and there was a murderous ache in my head that kept pounding mercilessly and tirelessly in my skull. My whole body felt like it was in flames. I could feel the enormous surge of magic that flowed within me. It was very familiar. Sweetheart, I heard a familiar, yet foreign voice call out to me. Wake up! A warm hand touched my body. It's time to wake up, the voice sounded again, more urgently. Reluctantly, I tried to pull my eyes open but I failed as soon as another ache banged against my skull. It was getting worse and more painful. I could feel the unsettledness within me. Sweetheart, wake up! The voice sounded again, encouraging me to break free once more. I groaned again and using all my strength, I pulled my eyes open. Everywhere was bright. So bright that I squinted my eyes, but still I couldn't see anything. All I could make out were distinct voices, near echoes, and some familiar whispers. They kept sounding louder, causing my head to bang harder. I had to pull my hands to both sides of my head in an attempt to stop my head from exploding. I kept on writhing in pain and screaming. But no matter how much noise I made, it was as if they all remained within the walls of my mind. The ache in my head kept pounding fiercer, getting stronger as if demanding my attention. The more I clutched harder to my head, the short images flashed through my head. It had the faces of people I didn't know or couldn't remember. I was not sure. Suddenly, the air around me became too hot for me. I needed some air. I jerked up from whatever bed I was in and began to search my way to freedom. Finally, I found the door, and I raced through it. Staggering my way through the hallways until I stood in darkness, under the bright moon. But it didn't get better, the air around burned me furiously, as the moon rays steadied themselves on me. I felt tremendous pain all over, as I began to run into the woods, fighting against the pain, against the ache, hoping to outrun it all. But it only grew worse. What is happening to me? I growled out, frustratingly. We are both in pain, I heard Adie's drained voice clearly in my head. Make it stop. I yelled as I collapsed on the earth in the middle of nowhere. Please make it all stop. I can't. It's our awakening. You have to stop fighting against it and accept it all, Adie spoke in a low tone in so much pain as well. Accept it? What did she mean by that? Before I could ask, another painful howl left my lips. Don't fight it. Accept it. Don't fight it. Accept it. The words began to echo within me, making me scream more. So, I did as it said, I stopped fighting against it. I let the pain take control over my body, and with one loud scream, my body crashed against the earth. My whole vision became blurry, and I could barely recognize my surroundings. "Come on, sweetheart," I heard a loud voice say, "you can do it. Remember, all you need is control. You must learn how to control your magic, otherwise, it'll control you," the voice said. I pulled my eyes open and I couldn't recognize where I was. But I could see myself, my younger self. It looked like I was around 8 or 9. "Remember, you are only as powerful as you want to believe," the voice sounded. I pulled my gaze to a corner and my eyes fell on her. My mother. The woman that had managed to haunt my every awakening. The woman I had always dreamt of but just couldn't remember. I watched my younger self crouch to the earth and placed a hand on it. "Feel its magic, and channel it. Make it yours," my mother was behind me, guiding me. I closed my eyes and began to rub my hand against the earth. My lips moved, and suddenly, they pulled open, glowing blue. Then flowers of different types began to pop up from the earth, looking beautiful. "That's my girl," my mother said, hugging my young self. Something wasn't right. Neither could I remember this day, nor could I understand what was going on. I didn't need any shaman to tell me what my younger self did was magic. But that's not possible. It couldn't be possible. I wasn't a witch. I had never done magic in my life. "I can't wait to show my brothers," my young self chirped in delight, widening my confusion the more. Brothers? Even though I had always wished I had siblings, I didn't have brothers. Abruptly, I paused. Or did I? I didn't know. I couldn't even remember this day, only the heavens knew what more I couldn't remember. "It's almost dusk, we should head back home," my mother said so warmly, that it made me doubt if she was referring to the Silver Mist Pack. That place felt nothing like home. I watched them leave the meadow that had now been covered with beautiful flowers. I trailed behind them, leaving the woods. My lips widened at the beautiful sight before me. I was at a place I never knew. It was beautiful. It was a castle, but one that was made out of crystals. White crystals. Where on earth was this place? I looked around when my eyes fell on the bold words that were written on the crystals. The Crystal Fortress. This was the Crystal Fortress for the Crystal Witches. I never knew I had ever been here. I watched my younger self run to the horses, while my mother met up with a witch at the entrance of the Crystal Fortress. I knew her. I had also seen her in my dream. The raven-haired woman. She was wearing a red cloak. Mother and she were talking in a low tone, sending worried glances at my younger self. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I could feel something was wrong. Soon, my mother returned back to my younger self. They climbed their horses and began to ride away. I started to race behind the dusty trail of their horses. I had to know everything. I desperately wanted to remember the past, to know who I was. I started to race behind the dusty trail of their horses. I had to know everything. I desperately wanted to remember the past, to know who I was. But I couldn't catch up with their speeding horses. I crashed on the ground, crying when my surroundings began to change. And soon I found myself in another unfamiliar place. It was a pack. But it didn't look like the Silver Mist pack. I was at a training field, and from afar, I saw two men training. They were fighting against each other. I walked closer, realizing one was a young child. A male, no less than 14, was training with a man whose back was sent to me. The young boy managed to land a punch at the man when I heard the sound of short laughter. I scanned the field and realized I wasn't the only audience for this training. There was another boy. He looked younger than the other boy. He kept on releasing short laughter as he watched the fight in amusement. Who are all these people? Come on, Leo, pretend as if you were fighting for your life, the young boy watching them shouted. Leo? That name sounded familiar. Before I could think, I heard a loud call. Father! I spun around and saw my younger self, racing to the field with my mother behind. They had just returned from the Crystal Fortress. She was racing to the man that was training the young boy. Was that my father? Was that Lucius Colosso? I watched as she reached him, and the man turned around embracing her tightly. No. No. That can't be. None of this made any sense. That wasn't my father. That wasn't Lucius Colosso. This was a bad dream, and I had to wake up. I tried to pull myself out, but then I found myself crippling on the ground, groaning in so much pain. The ache banging in my head returned and the killer pains in my bones came back to life. Don't fight it, Sheila. It is our awakening, we must remember, I heard Adi's voice. It was so faint and distant. Remember what? I yelled back at her, but what greeted me was an unmistakable silence in my soul. What did she want me to remember? My past? Even I wanted to remember everything. But none of this made sense. I wasn't a witch, and my father was definitely not that man. I yelled to myself when abruptly, a ring of blue fire surrounded me in a rush. The flames around me burned brightly, and intensely with purpose. Its flames began to circle closer around me, it moved to me, almost as if its intention was to consume me. I had started to feel its burning effect, when all of a sudden, I felt something shatter within me, and within the chaos, I heard the name of a familiar pack. The Black Blood Pack. Sheila's point of view. I stood frozen, unmoving as my gaze stared at the name written boldly on the castle walls. The Black Blood Pack. Confusion hit me harder. Why was I here? Nothing made sense. Now more than ever, I needed to know exactly what was going on. I was so curious to find out who truly these people were, and why wasn't the man whom I have always known as my father, not in the picture. The blue flames around me died instantly. I walked through the castle doors. I found myself in the large main room. My head turned right as loud noises echoed from there. I began to move through the golden hallways. The more steps I took, I saw several of my younger self racing through the hallways. I felt a piercing ache as I remembered memories of myself racing through these hallways. Soon, I reached the large dining court. It was filled with so many people. They were members of the pack, all having dinner around several tables. I moved closer to where my younger self was seated. Beside her was the child with deep hazel eyes. They were so familiar. I peered at them more intensely, suddenly gasping in recognition. Before the name left my lips, I heard my younger self say, "Kaiser." My blue eyes widened. It couldn't be. Kaiser Black. Hurriedly, my eyes darted to the other young boy having dinner. My eyes pierced into the soul of his deep blue. He was Kaiser's older brother. The one I met at the council, Leonardo Black. "Kaiser, be nice to our sister," Leonardo's deep voice sounded, sending a warm smile to me. Our sister? This couldn't be. They couldn't be my brothers. No. This was all too much to take in. I raced out of the large dining court. I didn't even know where I was racing to. I only stopped when I heard hushing whispers coming from somewhere. It was an office. The door was left slightly ajar. My mother was there with the man I can't seem to remember as my father, along with several others. I couldn't see their faces clearly, but I recognized some of them. They were the elder wolves. The Dark Circle has known about the child. It's only a matter of time before they discover her identity. One of the elders spoke. "You both can't shield her from her destiny," someone else spoke. "And we are not trying to. But my daughter is too young for what you are proposing, she's just 9. The man, my father, spoke angrily, banging his hand on the table. My mother went to him, soothing him. "Fiona, say something. You are a witch, and you saw the prophecy. You know the consequence if we delay any longer." Someone else spoke. "She needs to start her training and be ready for anything. None of us know when the darkness the crystal stones warned us about would surface. It may happen next week, or years later. But that child is the only one that can save our world." I understand what everyone is saying, but I am with Alpha Logan on this. Our daughter is too young to be exposed to that life yet. She has to come of age first, my mother said, placing a hand on her mate. I felt suffocated. I raced out of the castle, swallowing in some air. The ache in my head pounded the more as I growled in so much pain coming from my head and invading my mind. It was like a force that invaded my mind, forcing me to remember. Immediately, a careless scream left my lips, and a rush of images flooded my mind all at once. It was so painful that it attempted to rupture my entire being. This pain lasted for several minutes, and I collapsed on the cold, unfeeling ground. The pain banging against my skull has disappeared, but I still felt pain deep within the walls of my mind. My eyes welled with tears as I found the bright moon boring down at me. I remembered. I remembered it all. The tears that welled in my eyes began to rush down my cheeks, and I didn't bother to stop them. They fell from the pain that held me. I pushed myself from the ground, my eyes scanning the entire surrounding. I remembered it all. This was my home. I had lived all my life here before that night. My blue eyes rounded, remembering that night. I felt a sharp pain in my chest. "Oh, my goddess! Mother!" I began to run back to the castle doors, but before I could reach for it, my surroundings began to change and the moment I had always dreaded surrounded me. No. Not that night. No, please. I scanned around and all I saw was blood. Blood of our warriors of the pack. They were fighting against the Dark Circle army. They attacked in mass numbers when we were not expecting it. Father and my older brother had left for a meeting. It was only Kaiser, Mother, and I, along with the pack warriors and witches that were in the pack, but we were outnumbered and my people were dying just to keep me safe. From my peripheral vision, I saw my younger self being pulled away by Kaiser while the Crystal Fortress witches tried to fight back the Dark Circle army. More tears rushed from my eyes as Kaiser and I raced into the woods. I knew exactly what was going to happen. It hurt me more that I couldn't do anything to stop the tragedy that was about to happen. Many people lost their lives just to protect me, including my mother. Just as expected, a resounding growl rippled through the trees, causing great chaos on the earth. Even the wind turned violent. I looked up at the sky and it was red, having a blood moon in the middle. Suddenly, a red mist covered the land. I couldn't see anything. The fights had somehow stopped. I moved my legs in motion, racing to the woods where my younger self would be with Mother's lifeless body and Kaiser's unconscious one. I reached there, and the first person I could find in the mist was my brother, Kaiser. He was alive but badly wounded. I couldn't stop the tears that had covered my eyes as I began to search for my mother's body. I found her lifeless body in the mist, but my younger self was no longer there. I left my mother's body and raced deeper into the woods, and all I could see was a faint shadow of the man that started this war, Nell Reed, taking my unconscious younger self from my pack to the Dark Circle, no doubt. I left my mother's body and raced deeper into the woods, and all I could see was a faint shadow of the man that started this war, Nell Reed, taking my unconscious younger self from my pack to the Dark Circle, no doubt. That was all I could remember. For some reason, I didn't make it to the Dark Circle. By the time I regained consciousness, I had already lost my memories and was at the Silver Mist Pack as the only daughter of the Silver Mist Alpha, Alpha Lucius. What must have happened to me? I went back to where Mother was lying unconscious on the ground with her body already cold. I knelt beside her, bawling my eyes out. Everything was my fault. Mother's death, the Crystal Fortress destruction, and everything that came afterward. It was all my fault. I gripped her body tightly to me, crying profusely. Then I felt it, a certain warmness began to move on my hand. I pulled away, my eyes falling onto my wrist where warm crimson fluid gathered, feasting on my skin. I groaned at the pain that was growing by the second on my wrist. It lasted for a while before the pain stopped and a small runic symbol was imprinted on my wrist. I recognized the symbol. Mother also had it. It was our ancestral clan magic. Abruptly, without warning, I felt a conscious tug at my soul and new yet familiar energy spread around me, causing me to collapse further on the ground, shutting my eyes. By the time I pulled my eyes open, I was no longer at the Black Blood Pack. I had jerked back to reality and I wasn't in Killian's pack anymore, I was in the middle of nowhere. Darkness still covered the land and the moon's light never flickered away from me. I began to scan around when my eyes fell on the faint outline of a familiar castle, standing not far from where I was. I froze, as my eyes began to sting with tears. I was back at a place I haven't been for so long. My very home. The Black Blood Pack. I must have subconsciously wandered here. I let the tears in my eyes wander freely down my cheeks. I took the familiar path that my brothers and I usually made use of to sneak in and out of the pack. After a few minutes of walking, I had sneaked my way into the castle. Just being within the corner walls brought back memories of my past I couldn't believe I was capable of forgetting. I walked down the hallways, moving into the large dining court. I could feel the cold feasting on my dirty bare feet as I forgot to wear some boots before leaving Killian's pack. I walked closer to the paintings that stood up against the wall in the court. It was a painting of father and mother. My tears rolled down from my swollen eyes. The more pain enveloped me, I kept on crying profusely so that I didn't hear the silent steps that approached me, but as soon as I heard the very words I hadn't heard in a long time, I froze. Sister. Sheila's point of view, sister. The words echoed loudly in my ears. I could feel my insides become still. The cold that feasted on my bare feet traveled through my bones to my chest. I held my breath, as my body began to swerve around slowly. I turned around, and immediately, I was welcomed by those piercing deep blue eyes that were identical to mine. I couldn't push back the tears that formed at once just staring at the deep crystals of my older brother, Leonardo. My lips trembled against each other. Sheila, he said in a low tone, as his eyes regarded me cautiously in disbelief, and maybe confusion. I abandoned the traitorous words that failed to leave my lips, and without holding back, I pushed my legs in motion and closed the lonesome gap between us. I raced into his arms, clutching my arms around his neck. It took him a second before I felt his warm hands envelop me. Brother, I broke down in tears as the word left my lips. Leonardo held me tightly, almost molding me against his skin. Oh, sister, you have no idea how much I yearned for a hug from you, I heard his soft whisper in my ears. Reluctantly, I pulled away from him. I was about to speak when I heard faint sounds of footsteps approaching us. What is happening? A voice sounded. My eyes pulled past Leonardo to the figure that stood frozen a few feet away from us. Kaiser, more tears rushed down my eyes. I left Leonardo and raced to a shocked Kai. I collapsed into his arms, tearing up the more. Do you remember? He asked almost breathlessly as he pulled me back and cupped my face in his large palm. I nodded, watching his eyes shimmer with tears. He was about to speak when Leonardo sounded again. We shouldn't talk here. Let's go somewhere more private. Leonardo led us to the top floor of the castle. I walked through the hallways, drowning in my tears as they brought back memories of my mother. We reached the door at the end of the hallway, and Leonardo pulled it open, leading me inside. Kaiser followed as well. It was a dining room, smaller than the one on the ground floor. There was someone in the room. I recognized her. She was Denise. From the little I remembered her say, she was Leonardo's mate. Her eyes widened as they took me in. She was up on her feet and she rushed to my side. Her shocked gaze was on me and her questions were rooted in her eyes. Before she could ask anything, Leonardo went to her and placed a kiss on her lips. She remembers everything. I sat on the chair that Leo pulled out for me, while Kai clung to my side. He settled on the chair next to me, clasping my hand to his. How is it possible that you remember everything? I felt Leonardo behind me. He placed a hand on my shoulder, pulling me around to face him. I don't know, I sniffled. I don't even know how it happened. The last thing I remembered was walking into the woods and feeling so much pain. And that's when it happened, I started to remember. I can't believe it. Kaiser pulled me into his arms again. It must be your awakening, it somehow freed you of the spell binding your memories, Leonardo said beside me, causing me to stare at him widely. Spell? What spell? I asked, curiously. His gaze went from Kaiser to Denise, before meeting mine again. The reason you couldn't remember anything from your childhood is that you were under a spell, Sheila. Someone had intentionally blocked your powers and locked up your memories. Leonardo's words caused my heart to bang faster against my chest. I had no idea about all of these. But who could have done this? Suddenly, I paused in my thoughts, my blue eyes meeting Kaiser and Leonardo's. Lucius. It has to be Lucius. He was the one who took me and brainwashed me, making me believe I was his daughter. I was fuming with rage. All this only meant my so-called father knew who I was and kept me away from my family. It all made sense now. I understood why he always locked me up in the pack, and never treated me like his daughter. It was because I wasn't even his. I felt my anger grow fiercer, and the torches lighting up the dining room began to burn wildly out of control. I felt Kaiser's large arms around me. Breath, Sheila. He whispered to me, soothing me gently. We also suspect Lucius was the one who placed the spell on you, but it doesn't make any sense. He wasn't the one who attacked the pack and took you away. How on earth did you end up with him? Leonardo asked, pulling my attention to him. Do you remember anything else after the attack? Kaiser asked beside me. I shook my head, my eyes brimming with more tears. Sadly, the last thing I remembered was my mother dying to save me and that man took me away. I went unconscious. By the time I woke up I had forgotten everything and was already someone else. If you all knew who I was, why didn't you tell me? I let the tears roam freely. Now I understood why Kaiser always looked at me the way he did. By the time Leo and I discovered you were with Lucius all these years, it was already late. There was no way we could get to you in Lucius' pack. And before we knew it, you had already moved to Killian's pack, Kaiser said. There was no way we could tell you anything, you wouldn't have believed us. He was right. I might have not believed anything even if they had told me. What about father? I asked, noticing the sudden shift in the air. But I had to ask. I wanted to know everything. How did he die? Leonardo's large hand reached out to mine, covering my hand with his, but he didn't say anything. I felt guilt suddenly bathe through me. This was my fault. Everything that happened was my fault. Our mother was dead because of me, and so was my father. I broke down in tears. Everything that happened wasn't your fault, sister. Leo's hold on my hand tightened. Don't blame yourself. How can I not? I asked in tears. Those imbeciles destroyed the Crystal Fortress because of me, they attacked the pack because of me, mother lost her life trying to save me, and father I collapsed in Kaiser's arms. With the news of mother's death, father's wolf died. He couldn't bear the pain of losing his mate. And then, he was badly wounded during the war with the Crescent North Pack. He couldn't survive it all in one night, Kai said to me. But none of that was your fault. The only one to blame is the Dark Circle and Nell Reed, and his entire family. His entire family? I froze under Kaiser's stare. He meant Killian and Morgan. No Kai, Killian isn't. The entire Reeds are asterisk, it's because of them we lost everything, Kai muttered in rage. Kaiser, that's enough, Leonardo's words echoed within the corner walls. No, brother, that's the truth. It was their father who killed our sweet mother, I will never forget that night, Kaiser was screaming, his words forced me to remember my mother's death again. Nell Reed had murdered her. I felt a churn in my chest. In all of tonight's discoveries, I had forgotten one thing. Both my pack and my mate's pack were the worst of enemies. The blacks hated Killian and his pack, and Killian also hated us immensely. I have seen the rage in him whenever it came to the blacks, it's enormous. I couldn't stop the burning tears that rolled from my eyes as my emotion grew too strong to handle, just thinking about what would happen when the truth is out. I felt my whole body vibrate with so much pain, suddenly realizing I am in the middle of this hatred between my family and my mate. It made me just wonder how Killian would react when he learns the truth about me. What would become of us when he finds out I am a sister to Leonardo and Kaiser Black? I felt a terrible pain in my chest, acknowledging the truth that this won't end well. I could never turn against my own family, and I didn't want to be an enemy of Killian. Suddenly, the solid floor began to shake slightly beneath us. I felt my brother's hands on me. They were trying to calm me down, but for some reason, I just couldn't control my emotions or the vibrations around the hall. All I wanted was to release the pain in my chest. Sheila's point of view, I couldn't breathe properly, and the vibrations were only getting worse. Get away from her, you two. This is your fault, Kai. Denise made her way to me, pulling me into her arms. She began rubbing circles on my back, whatever she was doing was really helping. Soon, I felt myself calming down, and the vibrations from the earth stopped. I pulled away from her. Thanks, I am sorry, I didn't mean to upset you. Kai was by my side. I couldn't blame him. He had lived these years remembering that night, and the tragedy that befell us, while I had forgotten. We need to ensure more control of your magic. After what happened tonight, the Dark Circle will be after you, again, Leonardo said, and I nodded with him in agreement. I needed to put a leash on this uncontrollable energy within me. Mother had always been worried about this, but she always believed I was strong to control my magic, even at a young age. But how? I asked. There is no way I can do this alone. And you are not alone, sister, Kai said, and Denise nodded. Our brother's right. You will never be alone, you have us and Valerie will also help you, Leonardo voiced. I quirked my brows, confused. Valerie. Leo nodded. She knows about you, and to some extent, she can be trusted. After all, she's a crystal witch whose loyalty should come to you first. I was up on my feet, pacing. I didn't want to hear that. In fact, I hated hearing that. Even as a child, the witches from the Crystal Fortress had always reminded me of the prophecy, and my supposed destiny of being the White Wolf. Even though our mother was also a leader of the Crystal Witches, she didn't put that burden on me. Oh, goddess, all this was only getting complicated. Leonardo was next to me, making me stop walking. I don't want you to worry about anything. We are here for you, and nothing bad will happen to you, I promise. His words were soothing, but that was the problem. I don't want to lose someone I love again. And now, Killian and his pack will be in more danger because of me. There's something you also need to know, Kaiser said as Leonardo and I took our seats. We received a message from someone in Killian's pack, a witch. It doesn't say who the witch is, but they are after your life. What? Do they know about me? I asked. No, they are after you because you are Killian's mate, but I don't think that's the only reason, Leonardo said. That didn't surprise me. But that witch could be the one that murdered Rowan. Can you think of anyone in that pack that would want to harm you? Kaiser asked. I took a deep breath. The only person I could think of is Thea. She would want me dead. And who is she? Leonardo leaned forward. Killian's, Kaiser answered in the worst possible way before I could. And who is she? Leonardo leaned forward. What? Both Leonardo and Denise sounded in unison. Killian has a lover. Denise sounded, while Leonardo remained silent, but the rage in his eyes was frightening. He had. But she means nothing to him now, I said, but he still has her living in the castle, Kaiser sounded beside me. This time Leonardo was up, pacing. Everyone could feel the rage emitting from him, but he still didn't utter a word. He reminded me so much of my father all of a sudden. It's just for the time being, I said, deep down doubting my own words. After the curse is broken, Killian and Thea would be officially mated. Even with that, would it still be possible to send her away from the pack? Anyways, Thea cannot be the one who sent that message. She's not a witch, at least, in a literal sense, I said. All right, then it's someone else, Denise said, trying to lessen the rage pumping from both Leo and Kai. Come on Leo, stop pacing and take a seat, Denise called to him. Leonardo moved closer to where we were seated, his blue eyes met mine. Killian is a bigger imbecile than I had imagined, Sheila, he cannot be trusted. You cannot tell him who you are, Leonardo said in a serious, yet low tone. I shut my eyes, rubbing my palm against my face. Leonardo was wrong about Killian. He just didn't know him the way I did. Killian could be a lot of things, but Killian could be trusted. I trusted him with my life. But still, though I hated it, I agreed with Leonardo's last words. It scared me to think how Killian would react when he realized who I was. I know, I said. Guys, it's almost dawn, Denise said, drawing my attention back to the window. I have to leave now, I said to my brothers. Leonardo nodded reluctantly, while Kaiser could barely hide his disapproval. He didn't want me to return back to Killian's pack. But I had no choice, regardless of everything, Killian was my mate and he would be looking for me by now. Leonardo and Denise gave me a hug. Just let us know if anything happens, or if you need anything. I nodded, fighting the urge to tear up. It was a beautiful feeling having people who genuinely cared for you. I will take you back, Kaiser said, and I nodded gratefully. I left the castle with Kaiser through the back door without anyone seeing me. We took the horses and began to race toward Killian's pack. After a short while of riding, we reached the mountains to Killian's territory. I turned to my brother, I should go alone from here, the warriors are patrolling the mountains. Kaiser nodded, understandingly. He gave me a hug and I continued the rest of my journey alone. I reached the castle as the sun began to climb its way up in the sky. I headed for my chamber instead of going to Killian's. As soon as I reached my chamber, I stripped and took a hot shower. It did wonders to relieve me of the pains that feasted on my sore body. I got dressed and was drying my hair when the door pushed open and Killian's sweet scent and musk swarmed around me. I turned around to meet his deep amber pear. "Oh, goddess, Sheila," he muttered slowly as he hurried to my side. Without thinking twice, I raced to Killian, sprawling my hands around his neck. He wrapped his arms around me, bringing my body closer to his. I felt his hot breath at the crook of my neck, as he kept inhaling me. I was so scared, thinking something must have happened to you. If Valerie hadn't insisted I wait till dawn, I would have scoured through the capital to find you, Killian whispered, pulling my face to his. I could see the pain and the sadness in his depth. Before I could speak, Killian pulled me closer, leaning his head to mine, allowing his lips to touch mine. My hands tightened on his neck as I kissed him back with similar passion and desire that neither of us wanted to pull away. I kept on kissing him, moaning into our blissful kiss as his hands moved skillfully on my body. I didn't want anything to break this beautiful bond Killian and I had grown. Killian pulled away from our kiss. We were both panting profusely, holding on to each other like we were literally the air we needed to survive. "How are you feeling?" he asked, caressing my cheek warmly. "I am fine. I was so worried when I woke up and you were not next to me." "What happened? Where did you go?" he asked as his eyes searched mine. I pulled away from him, fighting back the tears that almost formed in my eyes. I went to the bed, and Killian was right next to me. Even though I didn't say a word, Killian could feel my pain and sadness. He wrapped his large arms around me. "Tell me, Sheila, what happened?" he asked gently. I could see the worry in his gaze. And I didn't like any of it, but weirdly I felt like everything had changed. Killian's large thumb held my chin, pulling my face to his. "You can trust me, tell me what happened? Why did you leave?" I couldn't stop the waters that clouded my vision, rolling down my cheeks. The fear and worry in Killian's eyes only increased. I don't want to lie to him, but at the same time, I don't want him to hate me when he finds out I was his enemy's sister. I breathed in deeply as Killian's fingers brushed back my tears. "Do you want to know the truth?" I asked him, my voice holding my tears. Killian's amber eyes never tore away from me as he nodded, wanting to free me of the pain and sadness I felt. "I will tell you the truth, Killian," I said, watching the corners of Killian's eyes furrow on me. Sheila's point of view. I watched Killian's reflection through my glassy eyes. He pulled me into his arms, fear crippling his facial features. "Hey, I don't like seeing you like this. We could talk later. You need rest right now, you need to sleep," Killian said, placing me down on the bed. He crawled in beside me, pulling the covers over us. I rested my head on his chest while his large arms swallowed me completely as he pulled me to sleep. I didn't know when the exhaustion took over and I fell asleep. I found myself in the darkness, crying with blood over me, and before my eyes I watched my mother die in the hands of that man, Nell Reed. Her blood splattered everywhere, smearing the lips of the feral beasts. And his dark murderous eyes fell on me. I jerked up on the bed, falling into Killian's arms that were ready to receive me. He pulled me into his arms, trying to calm me, but I couldn't stop the vibrations that made my body tremble. I gripped him tightly, trying to breathe him in to calm my unsettled emotions, but it was not working. Suddenly, the air around me began to grow cold while the candle flame began to burn out of control. This alarmed Killian at once, and I realized I could feel the confusion that rose within him, and also his immense worry for me. He pulled away from me, about to tend to the growing fire, but I held him back, wrapping my hands around him. I needed him to stop all this. I shut my eyes, inhaling as much of him as I could, and his scent was calming. Adi also helped calm me down, and slowly, I stopped, and the wild burning of the flame and the air returned back to normal. Killian cupped my face, gazing deep into my blue crystals. "What happened, love?" His voice was shaky with concern. He could see the chaos within me and just wanted to stop it all. I wish he could. I shook my head. I had a bad dream. Killian brushed back the locks of hair falling on my face. "It's just a dream, and nothing more." "I wish it was. But it's not," I whispered under my breath, but he heard me. "What do you mean?" he asked, confoundedly. I remembered memories from my childhood that I didn't even know existed, and now I don't know what to do with them, I said, still in Killian's warm arms. "Is that what you wanted to tell me?" he asked quietly, and I sighed, nodding halfway. "That was part of it." "All right, you can tell me, love." I shut my eyes closed, unsure where to start. I wanted to tell Killian the entire truth, but my brothers were right, it would be a bad idea. At least now. I realized it scared me to know Killian's reaction when he learns about my true identity. He hated my family so much, and I don't know if I could ever resolve the enmity between us all. Maybe I could, maybe I couldn't. But now was a bad time to let Killian know. I was adopted, Killian. Alpha Lucius isn't my real father. "I am not even from the Silver Mist Pack," I said, spilling half the truth. Killian's eyes held shock for a passing second before it morphed into rage. "That was why he treated you the way he did all this while, because you weren't his daughter, and he had the audacity to step into my pack." "What?" I cut him off. "What do you mean by that?" "Alpha Lucius was here today, he came with some warriors to see you," Killian said, and my brows crippled further. "Why would Lucius come here?" "He was a asterisk that didn't hesitate to give me away to his worst enemy. It didn't make sense that he would come here because he was worried for me. Something was wrong. Why did he really come here?" "Don't think about it, it doesn't matter. The next time he dares cross into my territory, he will regret it," Killian assured, and I nodded. "If Lucius adopted you, then who is your family?" he asked, regarding me quietly. "Do you know who they are?" I paused for a second, before nodding. A small smile found Killian's lips. "Maybe we can find them. Tell me, my parents are dead, Killian," I voiced. "What?" He paused, staring at me. Did Lucius? I read his expression and knew exactly what he was thinking. I shook my head. "He didn't. They were killed, but it wasn't Lucius," I said to him, looking away. "Then who did?" "Tell me, love," he urged, bringing my eyes to his. It doesn't matter anymore, Killian, I pulled my eyes away from him. Nothing could change the past. Killian bored at me thoughtfully for some long seconds, before pulling me deeper into his arms. I wrapped my arms around him, inhaling his sweet intoxicating scent. I know there's a lot you are not saying, but whenever you want to tell me everything, I will listen, Killian whispered sweetly to me. I could feel his pure emotions, and his sweet words only made me tear up the most. I pulled him closer to me and pressed my lips to his. Killian kissed me back passionately, lowering me onto the bed. Soon he was on top of me, his lips leaving my lips to allow me to breathe in some air. I swear I almost died last night when I came back and couldn't find you. I thought I lost you, Sheila, and it killed me, he whispered against my lips as I tugged on his hair. Before I could respond, flashes of the attack invaded my mind, and I jerked up, remembering everything that happened. Oh, my goddess, Ria! I couldn't believe I had forgotten about the attack. Alan too, my hand covered my lips, remembering I saw them both die. The warriors were all dead. They are fine, Killian held me tightly, his words pulling my confused gaze on him. Everyone is fine. No. No, that can't be. I watched Ria and Alan die right before me, I said to him. And that's true, Killian sighed. Frankly, I have no idea how it all happened, but they are alive. He added. But that's impossible, I muttered slowly. I couldn't remember anything after Alan saved me and was killed by that wolf. Valerie didn't tell the others about this, but it seems the blood moon in the red sky, an unknown magic that swept through the earth caused it. It brought Ria, Alan, and the warriors back. It saved everyone's life. So, whatever or whoever caused that, I can't help but feel grateful. Killian brushed his large thumb against my lips, pecking it. I breathed out in relief as my heart swelled with joy. Even though I had no idea how it all happened or what I did, I was happy I was able to do some good for the pack. I don't know what I would have done if everyone died because of me. Sheila, I was drawn out of my thoughts by Killian's low call. I turned to find his eyes almost glassy with tears. I am really sorry for last night, he whispered, and I remained silent, allowing him to pour out his emotions. It was obvious they were drowning him. It's my fault those imbeciles attacked the pack to have you killed, it's also my fault they kidnapped you. He paused, shutting his eyes while allowing his forehead to touch mine. I could only hold my breath, knowing them he was speaking badly of were my brothers. But I remained silent. I don't know what they must have done to you while they had you hostage, but I swear I'll kill every one of them for that. Killian was vibrating with so much rage with every word he muttered, and his rage was only intensifying my pain that I didn't know when I gripped hard onto his body, causing him to stop talking. His deep amber eyes narrowed on me. Don't, Killian, please, don't say such words, I said, watching his expression turn heated. They kidnapped you to hurt you, just so I could suffer, he said, his voice calm, but his rage was increasing. My lips almost parted at his words, about to defend my brothers and let Killian know they didn't kidnap me. But a more sensible part of me kicked against it. I would only fuel his rage. Killian wouldn't understand. If anything, my words will only upset him more. Let's just not talk about them, All right, I said, and he nodded after a while, dismantling his rage. Since no one was hurt during the attack, everything is fine then, Killian shook his head. Everything is far from fine. We have a traitor in the pack, what? Yes, Sheila. We don't know, but word about the curse had gone out. Now everyone in the whole of North Central and beyond knows our weakness, Killian voiced painfully. I was shocked. This was bad. As if reading my expression, he chuckled. But it wasn't one brewed from amusement, but one from pain, sadness, and frustration. That's not the worst part, love, he informed me, staring deeply into my eyes. The crescent moon rising is barely 3 weeks away and we just found out we still don't have the gifted one, he paused, gazing at me intently. Thea isn't the gifted one. My entire being froze. What? Sheila's point of view, that's not the worst part, love, Killian said with sad and serious eyes as I listened to him. The crescent moon rising is barely 3 weeks away and we just found out we still don't have the gifted one, he paused, gazing at me intently. Thea isn't the gifted one. My body froze in Killian's arms. What? Thea isn't the gifted one. Those words echoed over and over in the walls of my mind. Even Adi was as shocked as I was. I could have been expecting anything but this. I hadn't seen it coming. But wait, something was wrong. How is that even possible? I asked. From what I knew, everyone was sure Thea was the gifted one, even Killian had seen her in his dreams. So, how on earth could she suddenly not be the gifted one? I don't know. But Valerie confirmed it. The cleansing ritual with Thea's blood didn't work, he explained it all to me. While Adi was exploding with subtle joy, I couldn't help but feel sadder. This news brought me no joy in any way. If Killian doesn't find the gifted one before the crescent moon rises, Killian and the pack will be stuck with the curse for the rest of their lives, and if he dies, everyone will die as well. I hated Thea, no doubt, but at least she was a solution to all of this. Even if we found another gifted one before the crescent moon night, it would still be the same. Killian would have to officially mate and mark with her. Whether it was Thea or another woman, I would still feel the same pain. That's true, but it still feels much better that it isn't that Thea, Adi sounded in my head, making me mentally roll my eyes. Whether it's Thea or any other, I still would never be happy, I said, pulling my thoughts back to Killian whose deep gaze was still on me. What are we going to do now, Killian? I asked as Killian held my hand. Valerie has few suspicions about the gifted one, but she wants to be certain first. I crippled my brows, not understanding anything. What do you mean? She believes the gifted one is in the pack, Sheila, Killian said. What? Who is she? The words flew out instantly, as Killian's hold on me tightened. You, he sounded. His words began to echo loudly in my ears. I was still for a brief second before my lips parted. You are joking, right? I voiced, but Killian shook his head seriously. My blue crystals dwelt on Killian intensely as my heart pounded slowly. None of this made sense. How did the gifted one suddenly change from Thea to me? Hey, we are not certain yet, but Valerie has a way to confirm it, Killian said, rubbing the skin of my arms. If you are up for it, she'll explain everything to you, he added again, while I kept watching him quietly. He moved closer to me. I can't deny it, Sheila. Deep down I really hope Valerie is right and you are the one I have been desperately searching for. It'll be heartbreaking to realize that you were right in front of me all this time, but at the same time, it'll be wonderful to know that it's you, he muttered slowly, before engulfing my lips with his. He kissed me slowly, his large palm on my cheek moving tenderly to the back of my head, while my fingers tugged on his shirt. Killian and I pulled away, lying back on the bed. We managed to get some sleep. When I woke up, it was so bright outside, the sun was shining down so intensely. I stirred on the bed, and Killian was still beside me. His manly arms are around my waist. I smiled, positioning my eyes to stare at him carefully. His blonde hair fell messily to his face, his low stubble framed his jaw so beautifully, and his cherry-soft lips glowed under the sun's rays that seeped through the draperies. I smiled naughtily, lowering my gaze to his broad arms and chest. I could see the outline of his tattoo already, and suddenly, I badly wanted to run my fingers on it, and wrap my legs around him. I was drowning deeper in my naughty thoughts when Killian's voice filled the chamber. "Isn't it too early for impure thoughts?" he asked, the gate of his eyes still shut closed, but his lips formed a large smile while his hands pulled me on top of him. I used the opportunity to straddle him. "It's just the right time for that kind of thought," I whispered over his lips, forcing him to pull his eyes open. Killian's dark eyes regarded me quietly with intense need and wish. "And what are you thinking?" he muttered in the same manner I did. "I don't know, maybe a steamy shower could suffice," I suggested, raising a brow, as Killian's dark eyes swallowed me. He liked the idea as much as I did. Without wasting much time, I began to strip on him. His Adam's apple slid down, as soon as I abandoned the last piece of clothing on my body. I jumped to the floor, and Killian followed my trail. He stripped as well, and our bodies settled in the tub in the washing room. I was on top of Killian and I helped him to shower. After I was done, he helped me as well. Everywhere he touched on my body left a hot trail of sparks and tingles. My eyes became so dark with wish, and I wrapped my legs around his waist. Immediately, I felt the length of his hardened member. I smiled naughtily. I didn't sign up for an innocent little shower. I held Killian, pushing my body to his, and my lips crashed on his. Immediately, he responded to my kisses, knowing exactly what I wanted. I could feel his smile on my lips. His hands began to move on my body. I moaned, gripping a handful of his wet and sticky hair. I could feel my body and soul on fire. I felt every part of me burn intensely with Killian's touch. My emotions were heightened, the pleasure and the desire. I could also feel Killian's emotions. It made my core dripping wet for him. "Killian, I want you now," I moaned, and he didn't wait for a second to grant me my wish. I felt his hardened member at the entrance of my core, and soon he pushed inside me. I cried with pleasure as Killian began to thrust in and out of me. He pulled me out of the water into his arms while my legs tightened more around his waist. Killian began to pump faster and harder, making me moan even louder. He kept on his good work until I reached my climax, and so did he. We collapsed into the water and washed off the sweat on our bodies. After completing our shower, we stepped out to my chamber. I went to the rack and pulled out a pink dress for today, while Killian's eyes were on me throughout. He watched me get dressed, seated at the edge of the bed. He would have stayed longer if he wasn't mind-linked by Mason. My eyes turned to him as he strolled to the dressing table. I need to go now, but I will be there for breakfast, he pecked my lips. I finished dressing, and when I was done, I left my chamber, heading to the dining hall. But suddenly, I crashed into a huge, smiling figure right in front of my chamber. My lips also grew a smile instantly, and I literally leaped into his large arms. Morgan, I wrapped my hands around his neck as he held me close as well. It's really nice to see you again, I whispered to him. Likewise, he pulled away slowly. How are you feeling? He asked with concern in his voice. Better than ever, I said, taking his arm that he stuck out for me. We both began to make our way to the dining hall. I am happy to hear that. You really frightened us last night, but I am glad we have you back, he said, pausing abruptly when we reached the dining hall. His stare at me became intense. Did they hurt you? Tell me exactly what they did to you. All that laced his voice was rage. My eyes pierced Morgan's. By they he was talking about my brothers. No, they didn't, I said slowly. Morgan's eyes narrowed on me. Sheila, I know the last thing you want for this pack is a war right before the crescent moon night, but I know those Azsholes. I know what evil they are capable of, Morgan said again, his words conflicting with my emotions. While I was thrilled to know the extent of his concern for me, I was also furious with the way he kept addressing my brothers. My blue eyes met his, and all I wanted was to clear this misunderstanding and defend my brothers for once. I shut my eyes. Those Azsholes, Morgan, they are my brothers. I heard the words echo around and my eyes widened, watching Morgan green eyes color with rage. What did I just say? Sheila's point of view, I couldn't take it anymore. I shut my eyes and sighed. Those Azsholes, Morgan, they are my brothers, I said, pulling my eyes open. My blue crystals dwelt on Morgan's furious gaze. What are you saying, Sheila? Morgan's hands gripped my shoulders tightly, his nails digging into my flesh. He was furious, his gaze was murderous. Morgan, what the heck are you doing? Killian's raging voice sounded from a corner as he stalked closer to us. Morgan's grip on me only tightened as his green gaze shifted on Killian. Did you know? Did you know that she is a black? Sheila is one of them. Morgan yelled, and suddenly, everything began to shake violently. Killian cast a murderous gaze on me, one full of hatred and disgust. His lips pulled open, and he called for the warriors. Take her and have her executed right away. My eyes widened with how everything turned for the worst within seconds. I couldn't even speak a word before I was dragged away by the warriors. And just then, I knew I had made a mistake by spilling out the truth. I shut my eyes, feeling the pain in my shoulder lessen. Hey, Sheila, please look at me, do you feel any pain? I heard Morgan's voice echo faintly in the walls of my mind, forcing me to pull my eyes open. My gaze fell on Morgan, he was right before me. His eyes holding fear and concern and not the rage and hatred from a second ago. Wait a minute. Something was wrong. I scanned around and there was no Killian, and no warriors dragging me away. What happened? Sweetheart, you were daydreaming. I heard Adi huff in my head. Before I could respond to her, Morgan pulled my attention back to him. Are you all right? He asked, still worried about me. I nodded. He breathed out in relief. Now tell me, Morgan said, and I crippled my brows in confusion. Tell you what? You wanted to tell me the truth, he said gently. The truth. The words sounded in my ears. Please Sheila, you might want to keep that truth to yourself for now, Adi uttered, and I couldn't help but mentally agree with her. Now wasn't the best time to tell the truth, and with the way my daydreaming took a turn for the worse, I'd rather not say anything now. The truth is, I really don't remember anything. But I don't think they did anything bad to me, I said, taking a seat. Morgan settled next to me. If that's the case, then I'm glad we arrived just in time before something bad happened. I could only nod as the helpers served us some food. After a while, Killian joined us, but there was no sign of Thea around. I didn't let it bother me, I focused on my food instead. After we were done eating, Killian informed me of the meeting with Valerie in her spell room. He wanted to come along, but I talked him out of it. I had a lot to say to Valerie and it was best if Killian wasn't there. Reluctantly, he left with Morgan and Alan, while I headed to Valerie's spell room. I stopped at the tall door in front of me. Now it made absolute sense why it opened for me. Even though my memories were locked away, and my witch powers were bonded, I could still feel my energy. I placed my hand on it, and it opened. As soon as it opened, I saw Valerie standing in front of the door with a small smile on her lips. I was expecting you, her smile deepened as the door closed behind me. She walked closer to me. I was told you remember everything, she said. I nodded and we started walking to the table. Your awakening must have purged your entire soul and filtered every kind of impure magic binding you, she sounded. Yes, I think so, I muttered, watching Valerie's small smile still plastered on her lips. Why do I have the feeling that you knew who I was all this time? I didn't, but I can't lie, it didn't cross my mind. There were a lot of things about you that didn't just add up, starting with the door. She paused, but it's all behind us now, she smiled. Believe me, I am happy that you are still alive. I don't know what happened, and how you ended up with Lucius, but I'm thankful he kept you alive, instead of harming you, she said warmly. She was right. Even after how Lucius treated me, I was also glad that he kept me alive, and that he was more than happy to send me off with Killian, otherwise, I wouldn't have found out the truth about myself, and I would still be locked up in his pack. Lucius helped me without even realizing it. I heard about Thea not being the gifted one. I mean, Killian dreamt about her. How is that possible? She's not the gifted one. I asked. It's not possible. I don't know why Killian saw her in his dreams, but something is wrong somewhere. I suspect someone manipulated his dream, Valerie said. I stared at her in surprise. Someone? By someone, who do you mean? I asked. I am not sure. But it has to be a witch responsible for that. Someone who doesn't want the curse to be broken. Someone who wants to harm Killian, and now, I think you are also on that list, she voiced. You are talking about the witch who sent a message to my brothers? I asked, and Valerie nodded. The same witch who murdered Rowan in the dungeon, and maybe, was responsible for the fire in Thea's chamber, Valerie said, while I mentally rolled my eyes. I doubt that the fire in Thea's chamber was done by the witch. Thea is well capable of doing that herself, just so as to get Killian's attention. I don't know why everyone doesn't see that. But I couldn't say anything, otherwise, I could be tagged as a jealous mate. Regardless of what people might say, I don't trust that, Adi voiced. I nodded mentally in agreement. Me too, I still remember our encounter in Killian's office. The words she threw at me gave me a bad feeling. If I didn't know better, I would say Thea might be responsible for everything bad that's been happening in the pack. But that's impossible, since she's just a wolf, and I have no proof of anything. I digressed from my thoughts. You have to be careful, Sheila. The witch who tried to murder Thea thinking she was the gifted one might come after you. You must be careful. I nodded to Valerie's words. How sure are you that I am the gifted one? For goodness sake, I am Killian's mate. That doesn't make it impossible for you to be the gifted one. On the night of the blood moon, you stopped the blood rage driving them crazy, she said, and I chuckled lightly. That night, I was out of control. I did a lot of things, I said to her. But the night you stopped Killian from going on rampage, you were just fine, Sheila. That was the power of the gifted one on the cursed Alpha, she muttered, and I couldn't argue further. All right, what do I have to do to be certain I am the gifted one? I asked her. We must conduct another cleansing ritual, and this time, the moon binding the curse on the wolves must appear in the sky, she said. The crescent moon? I queried and Valerie nodded. When will the ritual take place? Tonight, she sounded. We must be certain to start planning everything from the beginning, since all this while, we've been using Thea's blood. All right, I whispered, sighing, my eyes pierced into Valerie's purple eyes. Do you also think it's a bad idea to tell Killian the truth? Frankly, I don't know, but what I do know is that the Alpha is a good man, including your brothers. They are all blinded by rage and hatred for one another, Valerie said. And the worst part is that, the monster that brought about this hatred is no more. Killian's father, Alpha Nell Reed, I muttered. Valerie nodded, yes, and that hatred is so dangerous that I fear it may lead to another tragedy. At her words, I felt my heart ache badly. It hurt me so badly that this so-called hatred existed between people I held in my heart. The pain was so deep that I gripped tightly to the table, breathing heavily. I had no idea what was wrong with me, but I felt several unidentified emotions cloud my heart. Sheila, Valerie was by my side, and suddenly, a violent wind appeared in the middle of the room, causing great destruction, and darkness covered us. Sheila's point of view, darkness covered us, and the violent wind that had taken over the room grew more deadly and violent. I was causing all of this, but I couldn't stop it. Valerie was by my side. Sheila, you have to calm down, your unsteady emotions have control of you. I am trying, but I can't, Valerie. I yelled to her in the chaos. She gripped my hand and began chanting, but nothing seemed to be evading the darkness or putting an end to the chaos. I could feel the tumult within me, and I knew just then that everything was about to get much worse. I held on to Valerie tightly, and just then, I felt something firm around my wrist. Suddenly, the whole chaos stopped. The darkness vanished and the air became calm once more. My eyes fell on my wrist, and there was a black bead around my wrist. My gaze traveled from my wrist to the door where a figure stood. I breathed in relief. Lorenzo. Thank the heavens, you came at the right time, Lorenzo, Valerie muttered as she used her magic and returned her spell room back to order. My eyes fell back on the black bead around my wrist. It was unusual, having strange symbols etched on each bead, and I couldn't feel the forced pumping in my veins anymore. What is this? I asked him, curiously. I can't feel anything. Don't worry, it's not harmful, it just restricts your magic and ensures something like this doesn't happen, Lorenzo explained, stalking closer to me in his black cloak. My eyes widened at his words, which clearly meant he knew I was also a witch. Before I could speak, he smiled deeply. Valerie told me everything. Be rest assured, your secret is safe with me. I turned to Valerie and she nodded. Your emotions are unsteady, you need training to ensure something like this doesn't happen again, Valerie said. I nodded, agreeing with her every word. I really needed to find a way to control the chaos within me. Lorenzo and I will be helping you with that, Valerie said. I nodded, taking another look at Lorenzo, who was next to me. You have to remember your magic is different, Sheila. Valerie's deep purple eyes landed on me. It's the type people would kill for, and you, more than anyone, know how dangerous that is. I didn't need anyone to tell me how much of a danger I am in. Even before my pack was attacked by Killian's father and the Dark Circle army, many dark creatures came for me. But I had my mother then, and now it all feels different. I know, Valerie. That bracelet will keep your magic restricted, but your magic will still be ever present. Until you learn how to control your magic, try as much as possible not to use too much of your magic, it could lead enemies straight to us, she voiced gently. Fine, I will try my best not to, I said, brushing my thumb against one of the beads. I was with Valerie and Lorenzo as they began to make preparations for tonight's ritual. Soon, we all moved to the witch's quarters to finish the rest of the preparation. After a while, it was already dusk. The witches were outside in the witch's courtyard, under the bright moonlight. Killian and some of the pack members were present for the ritual. The witches took their positions around a burning flame. I was standing next to Lorenzo, while Killian was standing next to Valerie. Valerie pulled out an athame blade, and she handed it to Killian. He held it with his left hand and pierced the sharp blade into his right palm. Blood began to flow from his hand, and it fell into the wooden bowl in Valerie's hands. As the cursed alpha of the Crescent North Pack, his blood represented the entire pack. Lorenzo pulled out another blade and handed it to me. I held it with my left hand and cut my right palm with it. My blood rushed down into the same bowl that contained Killian's blood. Immediately, Gwen began chanting and the witches forming a circle around joined in as well. Their loud chants rose up to the night sky as Valerie and Lorenzo began a different chant on the bowl that contained Killian's and my blood. Soon, the air around us charged with the magic of all the witches as they were now connected as one. Even with the bracelet on, I could still feel the intensity of their magic. After a while, Valerie placed the bowl into the burning fire, her lips kept on moving non-stop. The instant the bowl containing our blood touched the fire, it began to burn wildly, showing shades of different colors. The flames burned brightly, and everyone had to step back. The fire kept growing as it reached for the sky, and suddenly, its flames died. We were covered by darkness with only the moon's bright light that shimmered on us all. I held my breath, as everyone lifted their heads to the sky. I pulled my gaze up to the clear and dark sky. There was nothing up there, only the full moon. I was forced to pull my eyes away from the sky when I felt sparks from around my waist. I turned to my side to find Killian's arms around me. He placed a kiss on my lips and was about to say something when Lorenzo's voice sounded in the darkness. "The crescent," he muttered, forcing my gaze back to the sky. My eyes rounded from their cage at the sight of the faint moon that appeared in the sky in the shape of a crescent. Loud growls rose up in the sky, and sounds of laughter filled my ears. But I still felt so dazed to fully make out my emotions. I couldn't believe all this while, I was the gifted one. Killian's large thumb held my chin, slowly pulling my face to his, so I could see his deep amber gaze that held shock, disbelief, and elation. Without uttering a word, his lips swallowed mine in a deep kiss. "I can't believe this," Killian muttered against my lips. "Neither can I whispered, still in shock. Valerie moved to us, her deep purple eyes held so much joy. "After all these years, we have finally found the gifted one, the real one this time," she said as another round of growls from the wolves filled the air. Even still, I couldn't believe that I was the gifted one. Thea's point of view, I watched the witches perform the cleansing ritual again from afar. I tugged onto the hood of my red cloak that covered my hair and a little of my face. Throughout the ritual, my eyes didn't peel away from that stupid tramp. I felt fury coursing through my veins, and my nails dug deeper into the tree trunk that I was hiding behind. Soon, the ritual ended, and everyone's gaze pulled up to the sky. I also lifted my brown eyes to the night sky, and the crescent moon didn't appear up in the sky. I couldn't hide the dark smile that slothfully cut through my lips. Before I could let my elation run deeper, loud growls and laughter filled the air. "The crescent," I heard one of the witches say. Immediately, my eyes shifted to the sky, and to my horror and surprise, a faint outline of the crescent moon appeared in the sky. I froze. I felt my heart begin to pound louder and faster in my chest. This can't be. What was this? This was unbelievable. All this was the gifted one. The cursed Alpha's stupid mate was the one he had been searching for. She was the one that had always been in his dreams before I manipulated his dreams with my magic. I held onto the tree tightly until my nails had successfully made a hole in it. "She is the gifted one," I heard the voice of my lover draw close to me in the darkness. Swiftly, I felt his presence behind me. "What is our next plan?" Honestly, for the first time, I do not know. Those stupid alphas from the Black Blood Pack haven't reached out to me yet, and I am losing my patience. My angry gaze settled back on him and that stupid alpha. I hated the happiness that was rooted in his gaze. I knew too well, it was only a matter of time before he kicks me out of his pack because I am now completely useless to him. But I will never let that happen. That stupid alpha will never be able to get rid of me that easily, until my revenge is complete and I make sure he suffers for the rest of his miserable life. Whatever the case may be, I will make sure the stupid Alpha and his pack never free themselves of the crescent curse that my father placed on him. With everything Killian Reid has done, death itself was too modest for him.